Hello, and thank you for inviting me into your event. Unfortunately, I was unable to make it in person, but I am sending along this video message. My name is Randy Emelo, and today I'm going to be sharing my life passion and work with you. I am the co-founder of Triple Creek, which is a social learning software company, and my area of passion and expertise has been career and leadership development. Today, I'm going to be sharing with you what I've learned about what I call modern mentoring. And I'm going to be talking about some of the shifts and changes that have happened over the last 15 or 20 years in the practice of mentoring and how you can make the most of modern mentoring practices. The first thing that I want to communicate is a little bit around generational differences. If you haven't noticed, those with gray hair actually behave and act a little differently than some of the younger people that might be represented there in the audience. So I'm going to quickly touch on 4 critical generational differences as it relates to the practice of mentoring in organizations. The first generation is the post-World War II generation. We call them the traditionalists. And the traditionalists who were born between the years 1922 and 1945, they primarily approach and look at the practice of mentoring as a generational obligation. And so they would also look at it as an interdisciplinary kind of function. And what I mean by that is that a senior engineer would help to guide the development and career trajectory of a junior engineer coming into the organization. It's usually very senior to very junior. It's one-to-one. It typically happens face-to-face through job shadowing and would typically last maybe even someone's whole career, but very kind of a long tenured kind of relationship. The baby boomers came along and they're born between 1946 and 1964, somewhere in that range, and they began to see things a little differently, and they began to actually use the process of mentoring as a way of networking for success. And so they began to break out of the lines of discipline a little bit and began to connect with people who had more power and influence and could actually open doors for their future success. Along came the Gen Xers, and they began to see the world a little differently. They were not going to do what their parents did and basically sacrifice their families on the altar of work. And because of that, they began to use the process of mentoring more as a peer collaboration process. So more as a way to quickly collaborate with their peers in order to be more productive in the moment. And that way they could have a better work-life balance and spend evenings and weekends with their family. And then the millennials came along and really just upset the apple cart. They really began to change things in their approach to learning, because the millennials are the first generation that truly had global access to knowledge and information from the day they began the educational process. So for them, mentoring is simply peer collaboration and learning collaboration, and it's very synonymous. It's the way that they learn, and this is evidenced by the fact that if you see someone who's 30 and under, their typical approach to gathering new information and applying new practices is they'll go out and they'll ask the opinion of 5 or 6 people from various backgrounds and understandings and levels of experience, and will quickly synthesize a result and simply begin to experiment with it and apply it. And this approach to learning and development and from a career development perspective has totally changed the paradigms and how we begin to view the practice of mentoring today. With that said, I'm going to just take a few moments and discuss a couple of the critical shifts and talk about how to actually create an effective mentoring network today, because that's what's beginning to happen. Is the practice of mentoring is moving away from an isolated, insular, paired experience to one of creating a cadre of people that you're interacting with. Think of this first shift, that there's a shift or a change in the language that's being used when addressing people in mentoring relationships, as well as viewing who can be a possible mentor. So when you begin to look at mentoring as more learning collaboration versus a hierarchical or top-down experience where you're a very junior person looking for a very senior person to guide your career development. And I'm not saying you don't need that kind of advice and input, which you do, but the reality is today it's shifted and changed. So instead of thinking of only people who are more senior in your areas of discipline to be your mentors, think again and shift your language a little bit and start thinking of, instead of mentor, think of them as an advisor or a guide. And then instead of thinking of a singular mentor or a guide, think about multiple mentors and guides. And then also think that anyone can advise you. If they have more experience than you do, regardless of how old they are, they can share that experience with you. They are that advisor or guide that could service you. So my encouragement is stop thinking about mentoring from a hierarchical standpoint and start thinking of it from a holistic standpoint. So just start thinking about gaining the resources and experiences that you need. Also think about the fact that learning is as much giving away what you know as taking in what you don't know. So the practice of mentoring today is more about sharing. It's more about seeing yourself both as a learner and an advisor to others on a continuous basis. So don't think of mentoring as this activity that happens over coffee and with a single person, but it's something that happens as you move through your work world and through your career. And I can tell you from my experience as an entrepreneur, when I've had to learn different disciplines in different areas of the business, this new modern mindset has served me well. The second shift I want to talk about is that mentoring has moved beyond just looking for advisors within your area of discipline or focus. The example that I would use is that when I was starting off as a young entrepreneur and creating my first business, I was very passionate about my areas of expertise, but I knew almost nothing around business development or sales or marketing or how to manage the finances or how to create a strategic plan. And all of those are things that I learned through creating a network of advisors. Some of them were peer advisors, and some of those were people who were more senior and had far more experience with me that could help me, could help understand where I was in my development and not try to teach me everything I needed to know, but just craft messages for me that actually fit the use cases that I was experiencing. And that's really what we're beginning to see with modern mentoring, is that it's becoming more about the context of the conversations and the learning that needs to take place versus just trying to become an expert at everything. So being able to take in just the amount of information that you need to be able to operate proficiently. And for me as an entrepreneur, a lot of it came down to when I began to hire engineers to develop our code. I had to know enough about software engineering to be able to speak the language to manage and direct their efforts and not just abdicate that piece of my business to that person. My business was far too important to me, and I'm sure your business will be far too important to you to do that. And again, there's no one person that I knew of who would be able to have all the skill sets and all the experiences necessary to help me become a successful business person in every aspect of my business. And so, in a sense, I began to create a network of advisors, and I began to give that advice away as soon as I was getting it to other people who were learning behind me. So I think it's really critical as entrepreneurs that you create really good peer connections and relationships with other entrepreneurs and share with them the truth about what's happening with you. And so another part that I've learned about what makes mentoring really work is sharing your personalized experience and understandings. That means your opinions, your hunches, your suspicions, your judgments. as well as those things that worked and those things that didn't work, and your suspicions as to why they didn't work. So it's really critical to create these relationships that are founded on transparency, openness, honesty, and exploration. So with that said, what we're putting together is this new picture of what a mentoring network looks like. So I've already kind of addressed the issue that if you're thinking that mentoring today happens in a cafe once a month for an hour over cappuccino or espresso, that's not how it happens. Mentoring today happens in the process of work. And it happens with a network of people, and it also happens typically virtually. So think of your mentoring possibilities as the whole world, and all of the potential people that you know within your discipline, and those people from without your discipline who may get recommended to you as being those people who can potentially advise you or who you could and learn from, as well as those people you can advise and share your understanding and experience with. I know for me today, I'm working on creating some channel partnerships. I've never done that before. And the person who's actually advising me is another CEO of a well-known company out of Switzerland. And so that's where that relationship is. Our relationship is happening virtually. It's happening through phone calls and email, and we're using WebEx or GoToMeeting or other kinds of technologies that are readily available. And actually, to tell you the truth, we do a lot of our communication simply using our iPhones and text messaging each other. And so at 2 a.m, I'll get a text message in reply to a message I put out at 3 p.m. the day before. But that absolutely is working for me, and it'll work for you as well. As we look at these networks, I want to just describe what does this network look like so that you have some idea. Over the last 12 years, we've been researching this, and I can tell you emphatically that your mentoring network should have between 12 and 15 people in it at all times. So you need to think volume matters. So if you're only getting advice from one person, chances are you're not getting enough advice, or you're not getting enough diversity, enough various opinions in your advice to be truly generative and to create innovative solutions to the creation of the business that you're looking at. The second thing is that not only does size matter, but shape matters. As I mentioned before, I think it's really critical in today's global ecologies that we really look to create a global network and look to create not only a local network of people you're collaborating with, but start looking cross-culturally, look at getting people involved from various generations and get those generational perspectives, helping to round out your thoughts and your thinking processes and challenging the decisions that you're making, and also look cross-gender. So it's important to look across the typical barriers and make sure that you're not just creating a herd mentality, which means that, just sticking with people who operate within the disciplines or within the business areas that you're currently focused on, but make sure you get some of those various opinions. I can tell you in my personal learning network right now, I have someone who runs a construction company and who builds buildings. I have someone who is in the financial securities industry. I have people within my own discipline within learning development and human capital software. And so I just have a variety of people who are speaking into my practices and who I listen to and who I probe and ask questions of. And sometimes it's very interesting if you ask the same question the same way to 4 different people from 4 different backgrounds and levels of experience, you're going to get some unique solutions to the problems that you're facing today. And then finally, I want you to think about quality. We're looking at size, shape, and quality of your network. The quality aspects gets into making sure that you keep your network flexible, which means that you're inviting new voices into that network and new avenues of outlet. So instead of trying to be like the Dead Sea, where there's an inlet and no outlet, you want to make sure that you're involved in both advising and learning activities, and that you're bringing new voices into that mix all the time. I'm going to leave you with some advice. First of all, I'm going to basically challenge you to start thinking differently about mentoring. So mentoring, in my judgment, will be totally ineffective if you just have one senior advisor in an area of discipline. So think of those people right now. Pull out a piece of paper if you have it, and think of the people that you're currently networked with. Think about the people who are drafting off of your knowledge and who you are sharing, and they are actually learning from you. And think about those bits of business data and personal information that you're learning about your career or about your business development efforts. Think about those people who are contributing in significant ways. Now, as you look at the people you've written down, I want to challenge you to add 2 more people on the advisory side. What are 2 people that right now you have a problem you're trying to solve, or you have a business challenge that you're trying to meet, and maybe you're trying to create a business plan? And who are some people right now that you can think of that you would like to go and sit down and have a frank conversation and get their experience and their advice, their input into helping you build your business? It could be a peer. It could be someone who's junior to you in your area of discipline, or it could be someone who's more senior. So write down 2 names of 2 people who you need to go and ask to advise you and become a guide to help support your entrepreneurial efforts. And then I think what I want you to do is write down 2 more people who could benefit from the knowledge and experience that you have currently attained and gained. Who are 2 people who just that they may have already hinted, or they like to spend time with you, and just formalize those relationships, those 4 relationships that I've identified. And by formalize it, I want you to put down an action plan. By when are you going to approach these people and simply ask them if they are willing to engage in a learning collaboration relationship with you? And I wouldn't use any other terms. I wouldn't use formal terms like, will you be my mentor, or will you sponsor me? I just simply would go and ask, will you become a trusted advisor for me? Or will you become a learning collaborator with me? There are things that I feel I need to share. Do you think you could benefit from my experience? And my guess is in every one of those 4 cases, those people will say yes, and you'll be well on your way to creating that modern mentoring network. Thank you, and I hope you have great success in your entrepreneurial efforts.